George Eustice. Welcome to the programme. And first of all, the French ambassador...
Good morning.
...has been summoned to the Foreign Office. Do you think this will be enough to de-escalate the situation?
Well, look, I think it's the right thing to do in the first instance. The background to this is that on Wednesday, France made a number of quite extraordinary threats that basically they would close ports to UK fishing vessels, be deliberately difficult and obtuse when it came to goods going through the border, and then actually politicise the fisheries enforcement process. It's really not what you'd expect from a friend and ally. And so the right thing to do in the first instance is to raise it with the European Commission, as we've done so, and to raise it through diplomatic channels, which we are doing. And we very much hope, obviously, that France steps back from the threats that they're making.
How do you respond to that word that Macron's maritime minister has used, fight? Is that a word that you think is accurate to describe what's going on in the English Channel right now?
Well, I don't think it is, but I also think to make these threats is totally disproportionate. So, to put this into context, since the end of the transition period, we've licensed almost 1,700 EU vessels. Nearly 750 of them are French vessels. It's about 98% of all of the EU vessels that sought a licence have been granted one. There's a tiny percentage of vessels, around 55 in Jersey, and a similar number in our inshore waters, that aren't able to demonstrate that they have the necessary track record, so they just don't qualify. But it's only about 2% of all of the applications. The other 98% have already got their licence. So just to put it into context, we've applied, and the TCA, the agreement in full. We've given a licence to every vessel that was entitled to it, including a very large number of French vessels.
But of course the French would say it's not that 98% figure, it's around that half figure. They just don't have the paperwork to prove it. A tricky situation, I suppose. In the Telegraph this morning, however, there's been some suggestion of what the UK is considering further than just that summoning of the French ambassador. I want to ask you about the likelihood or the prospect of some of those responses that the UK government is suggested to be considering. A bilateral with President Macron at the G20. Is that something that would really be strong enough to try and de-escalate this situation?
Well, look, as I said, we think in the first instance that using diplomatic channels is the right thing to do. And of course, France, as an EU member, doesn't decide its own fishing policy. That's set by the EU, and the EU represent France internationally when it comes to fisheries. So we're raising it with the European Commission, since they've got a role in making sure France abides by the law and abides by the terms of the agreement. But we're also raising it diplomatically, and we think that is the right thing to do in the first instance. But obviously, if France carries through the threats that they've made, and they've suggested they might be doing this from Tuesday, were they to do that, then obviously we reserve our options to respond in a proportionate way in kind.
A proportionate way. Is there anything that you would rule out? The UK has actually deployed the Royal Navy before in terms of fishing disputes. Is that something that you would think to rule out, or is that potentially an option on the table?
Well, I know people often get carried away about involvement of the Navy, but the fisheries protection squadron's the oldest part of the Royal Navy and has always done fisheries work, even when we were in the European Union. So yes, we do have fisheries protection vessels in the Royal Navy, but also other marine assets of that sort as well. But principally, we want to try to resolve this dispute by getting France to understand and accept that those 55 vessels that haven't been granted a licence, probably aren't entitled to one. And if they're able to offer us the evidence that supports the applications, well, we'd process them. But for now, we're trying to de-escalate this, but we're also very clear that if France carries out the threats that they've made, then we will obviously make a proportionate response.
And just finally, the French seem to be threatening to break the terms of the trade and cooperation agreement. They seem to be threatening to deploy arbitrary checks on our lorries to stop our boats being able to dock in their ports. This is sort of perfidious behaviour. Would this jeopardise our understanding and our commitments to the trade and cooperation agreement, to that Brexit trade deal?
Well, look, we are committed to it, and indeed we've implemented it. So we've issued nearly 1,700 licences to fishing vessels because they're entitled to access under the terms of the agreement. I think it would be quite a step if France were to, break the agreement and possibly even break EU law in terms of border control posts and how they behave at those posts. That would be quite a significant step for them, and obviously we'll be asking the European Commission to ensure that its member states abide by the law.
It's an extraordinary situation, and one that no doubt we will be continuing to follow very, very closely. George Eustice, thank you so much for joining us this morning.